Good morning, dear friends and participants of our marathon for the good of the world. It's the 3rd of June, and it is Friday. It's time for our Srimad Bhagavatam reading. Today, the Srimad Bhagavatam reading will be Bhakti Bhagavatamrita Keshava Swami. Even though we all know him, I will introduce Maharaj. Maharaj is the Chief Secretary of the southern parts, and he very frequently gives incredible courses. Good morning, Your Holiness. Over to you. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, dear friends, everyone who is watching on the recording, wishing everyone happiness. Today is Caitanya-Caritamrta class, I believe. And the Leelas of Lord Chaitanya are equal to a bottomless ocean. We develop incredible qualities, and a good fate is laid out for us. It's very incredible that such a marathon is happening, and everyone is feeling great happiness and joy. We will read from the 18th chapter of the Charitamrita, a few episodes, and a few very important lessons for our becoming more spiritual. And this episode, I hope, is very beneficial. So shall we begin by singing first? I will be singing on the harmonium. You sing along, please. In the chat, you will get the Panchatattva Mahamantra and the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. I'm sure everyone knows. The Panchatattva Mahamantra, many should know. And for those who don't, they can look it up and it will be placed on the chat. It is a very glorious prayer. Lord Chaitanya is praised. Jaya means glory. Sri Krishna Chaitanya is an address to Lord Chaitanya, and Krishna in this incredible incarnation of mercy of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Prabhu Nityananda is his expansion of Lord Balaram, the first incarnation of Lord Balaram, which comes from Krishna, who comes to participate in the Leelas of the Lord as Nityananda. Nitya means eternal and Ananda means bliss. So he is eternally filled with bliss, and this bliss he gives to everyone who come to him. Sri Advaita is the next manifestation of the Panchatattva, of the 5 truths. He is the closest associate of Lord Chaitanya. He is the incarnation of Mahavishnu, Shiva, and Mahavishnu and Shiva have come into one to participate in the Leelas. Gadadhar is his internal energy, and Srivas represents all the living entities and all devotees. And so in this way, all the 5 categories of the Supreme Truth, the Lord himself, his full expansions of his expansions, his internal energy, and his external energy of the living entities. And so, let us sing and the Hare Krishna mantra. This will help us to come into the right consciousness to discuss our topics today.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Krishna Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasa Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Теперь вместе. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura, Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jaya Panchatattva Jaya, Panchatattva Jaya, Panchatattva Jaya, Panchatattva Jaya, Panchatattva, Panchatattva Jaya, Panchatattva Jaya, Panchatattva Jaya. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, and so good morning. We will read today from the 18th chapter, Sri Caitanya-Caritamrta, where it is described the coming of Lord Chaitanya and his travelling into Vrindavan. Vrindavan is an ancient place of pilgrimage. It is an eternal abode of Krishna, where Krishna periodically reveals his pastimes. He comes with his eternal devotees and shows this place of eternal love to which people of this world can connect. And even now, coming to these places, we can become part of the love of this place and this pastimes there. We can come into contact with saintly people and elevate our consciousness and become part of this culture of love. In this world, there can either be a culture of love or a culture of lust. So the culture of lust is when externally we want to gain something for our own gratification, and the nature of love is being fulfilled within ourselves and to share this love externally with others. It is completely the opposite mood. And Sri Caitanya-Caritamrta teaches us this culture of love in particular. It's a very precious gift. If we're able to receive it, it completely changes our life. It fills us from the inside, this internal happiness which is not dependent on external circumstances. External means something comes to our life and something leaves. But if a person has this internal connection with the source of love, with God, and he has this relationship with him, then it is an internal source of love, and it makes a person impermeable to the circumstances of the external world, and due to this, the person can come into contact with the world, being completely independent of anything external, and he can carry out the necessary actions and words in order to give this love to others. This is how a person lives in this world, filled with love and devotion within the heart. And so Lord Chaitanya visited this holy place. At that time it was in a hidden state. So time to time the Lord comes there, it comes to life, and then it can change into a secret state. And it appears like it's a simple forest, a simple place. But by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, he came there in order to reawaken this place, in order that people of the whole world can come there and become filled with this spiritual happiness, in order to awaken their sleeping love of God, which lives in the heart of every living being. And Lord Chaitanya went around all of the 12 forests within this abode of the Lord. And in this forest of Vrindavan, which is in the center, there is one in the center and the rest are surrounding it. In the forest of Vrindavan, he took his residence in Akrura Ghat. It is a holy place where Akrura was crossing the Yamuna River when he was carrying Krishna from his home to Mathura. These leelas are all described in Srimad Bhagavatam. We will go to the central reading of the 91st verse. Let us say the prayers and pray that some sort of enlightenment will come to us today.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
All glories to Sri Chaitanya, all glories to Nityananda, all glories to Advaita, and all glories to all the devotees of the Lord. And so I will read in Bengali the verse, and then we will read in English.
Ekadina akrurete loka pratah kale Vrindavana haite aise kari kolahale.
One morning many people came to Akrura-tirtha. As they came from Vrindavan, they made a tumultuous sound. So Lord Chaitanya was resting in Akrura-tirtha under a tree, and one day in the morning a very loud crowd of people were coming there, and they were talking about something amongst each other and didn't draw attention to themselves. Upon seeing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the people offered respects at his lotus feet. The Lord then asked them, "Where are you coming from?" The people replied, "Krishna has again manifested himself on the waters of Kaliya lake. He dances on the hoods of the serpent Kaliya, and the jewels on those hoods are blazing." I will just give a little clarification here for anyone who might not be familiar with these leelas. Once Krishna had an incredible leela on the waters of Yamuna, and there in these waters there was a huge serpent living there, and he had many heads. Now it is very rare to see these serpents, maybe a few with a few heads, but this one had many heads. He was very poisonous, and he was poisoning all of the waters of this lake. And any living entity, even birds who were flying overhead, they were getting poisoned by the fumes, and they fell down dead. And also surrounding this lake, all of the trees and the grass had burnt up from the poison. Only one tree remained living, and it was hanging over the lake. It was said that once on this tree fell a drop of nectar of immortality, which Garuda, the carrier of the Lord, was carrying. He was once carrying this pot of nectar and poured a few of these drops, and so one of these fell on the tree, and the tree is actually still alive in this place where this leela took place. And so Krishna jumped from this tree and had a battle with this serpent, Eventually he jumped upon the heads of the serpent and danced upon its hoods, and the serpent gradually lost all strength and considered himself defeated, and he prayed to Krishna and became his devotee. So there Krishna revealed an incredible dance there. And people were then saying to Lord Chaitanya that they have seen him on this lake 4,500 years after this pastime. They saw something incredible on the Yamuna, which they thought was Krishna. They said, "We have seen Krishna dancing upon the heads of Kaliya, and the jewels which were decorating the head of the snake were lighting up Krishna. We saw Krishna himself. There is no doubt about it." Hearing this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to laugh. He then said, "Everything is correct." Lord Chaitanya understood that this is simply a fantasy of the people, or something they have seen and consider to be Krishna. He didn't counteract these views. For 3 successive nights, people went to Kaliyadaha, or the lake of Kaliya, to see Krishna, and everyone returned saying, "Now we have seen Krishna himself." Everyone was coming to Lord Chaitanya with the words that we have seen Lord Krishna with our own eyes. And so by the mercy of the goddess of knowledge, they were saying the truth, because eternally the games and pastimes of Krishna are happening there. Therefore it is said that they were speaking the truth. Looking at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they actually saw Krishna, because in fact Krishna was in front of them, because Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself. And so looking at him, they did in fact see Krishna, but at the same time they thought they saw him somewhere else. But because they were following their own imperfect knowledge, they accepted the wrong thing as Krishna. At that time, Balabhadra Bhattacharya placed a request at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. At that time, Balabhadra Bhattacharya was somebody who was accompanying and serving the Lord. He said, "Please give me permission to go see Lord Krishna directly." And Srila Prabhupada notes here that people who were in illusion came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and actually saw Lord Krishna. But they were in illusion and thought that he had actually appeared in the lake of Kaliya. They thought that they had seen Krishna himself performing the dance on the heads of the serpent Kaliya. Because these people were relying upon imperfect knowledge of their minds, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they were considering to be an ordinary person, and the light of the fisherman to be Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada notes that for as long as people's consciousness is confused by imperfect knowledge being experiences which we are gaining through our external senses, our minds, some sort of information which we're receiving, which are based on this mental and sensual understanding. People have come up with particular theories, for example, the theory of Darwin, that there is a tiny entity which gradually evolves to a more complex living entity, and then there are these lizards. The lizards turns to more evolved ones, and eventually from the monkey to the person. So, for example, this theory, there is this connection that these forms are similar, but in fact, there is the evolution of the soul. But according to this illusory knowledge based on the mental speculation, This is how it appears, and many people believe this theory. And in fact, there are no confirming factors that this theory is true. There is no in-between phase between a monkey and a person. And in fact, scientists have distributed information that there is a medium factor of an evolved living entity between a monkey and a human. But when they examined the bones more closely, they realized, and by checking, they realized that these bones were in fact different living entities. And so in this way, there is no factual confirmation of this theory, but there are masses of confirmation that people lived thousands and even millions of years ago. There are archaeological finds which prove that thousands and millions of years ago there have been people, which completely destroys the theory of Darwin. And there is a book called Forbidden Archaeology, where factors are brought to light which are forbidden by current scientists, which does not conform to the current understanding created by certain materialistic views which state that everything evolved from matter. And therefore, when a person's consciousness is not clear due to this materialistic consciousness, even seeing God himself in front of him, he will not be able to see him properly. Just like people saw Lord Chaitanya in front of him, they thought him to be some sort of saint. But at the same time, they took a fisherman who, during the night time, lit a lamp and threw his nets into the water. From a distance, it looked like Krishna. And so their imagination they took to be reality, and reality they took to be imagination. This is a very important factor, that as long as we are reliant on our empirical senses, our mind and our physical senses, we will be in illusion in regards to the actual truth. And so the first step in the spiritual path, we must understand that our senses and our mind are imperfect. Because I am filled with these sensual organs, I am condemned to make 4 mistakes. The first mistake being the imperfect senses. They are limited. I cannot interpret the external reality in the right light. My eyes cannot see in a certain light. If everything is dark, I cannot see. I can see only at a certain distance. So by this way, the external senses are very limited. And so the eyes are only in a certain dimension active, and all the other senses have certain limitations. Therefore, I cannot see all the realities, only very limited realizations from the senses. And by this, I come to certain conclusions in my mind. And the following mistake, which is a limitation of a human, is the proneness to fall into illusion. We can see that people were looking at this fisherman and took him to be God. And then a person creates a mistake. That's the third limitation, is the proneness to make mistakes. And we can see here that people made a mistake, having believed that this was God. This illusion was taken to be reality. And by this, they started to tell everyone else that this was also God. And also people have the tendency to cheat. Some people, finding out that this was a mistake, they will carry on cheating others to convince them that this was actually Krishna, and then they will say that a fisherman appeared, so as not to fall face flat in the mud and to show their foolishness. People are prone to cheat and to lie. So these four limitations are very deeply embedded in the hearts of conditioned souls, and this comes from this illusory conception of life. And so the first step is to renounce this method of obtaining the truth. By this method we can get a very basic understanding of reality. For example, so that we can see that the water is boiling and that we need to turn it off, or the milk is boiling. Empirically we can see this, so very basic questions we can solve. But to see that which is beyond our conceptions of sensual understanding, we must receive different eyes. We must look at everything with a spiritual view. And this scripture, such as Caitanya-Caritamrta and spiritual teachers which help us to gain this understanding, like Srila Prabhupada's commentaries, and looking at this situation with a different view, we can get the eyes to see this deeper reality and correctly see reality. Therefore, in order to see another person, we must know something about him first. If we do not know the person, we will just perceive the person through the eyes of our mind. So we create these forms which in fact have no relation to the truth whatsoever. But if we genuinely find out about the person and find out how did he live, who is he, who are his parents, we will get a completely different picture of the person. Similarly, when we listen and hear about Krishna and find out about his name and form, his leelas and pastimes, from authoritative scriptures, we get this knowledge, we get this ability to see the Lord. For example, if these people had the knowledge about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they would understand who it is in front of them, and they'd be able to look at him in a different way. But in the present case, they're looking at him like an ordinary person, but at an ordinary person they are seeing God. Because these people, in their minds, were speculating with imperfect knowledge, they saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as an ordinary human being and the boatman's light in the lake as Krishna. One must see things as they are through the mercy of a spiritual master. This is a very important point here. That only thank you to the spiritual master who does not look at the surroundings as ordinary, but through the prism of holy scriptures, and due to this, his view on the world are spiritual. Otherwise, if one tries to see Krishna directly, he may mistake an ordinary man for Krishna, or Krishna for an ordinary man. Everyone has to see Krishna according to the verdict of Vedic literatures presented by the self-realized spiritual master. So this is a guru who has self-realized spiritual knowledge of himself, and he looks at everything through spiritual senses and sees everything in this true light. A sincere person is able to see Krishna through the transparent via medium of Sri Gurudeva, the spiritual master. And so the spiritual master is not simply like people sometimes say, if I accept a spiritual master, I won't be able to myself reach God. But the spiritual guru is a helper on our spiritual path. Unless one is enlightened by the knowledge given by the spiritual master, he cannot see things as they are, even though he remains constantly with the spiritual master. This incident at Kali Daha is very instructive for those eager to advance in Krishna consciousness or in this spiritual consciousness, who wants to awaken this spiritual vision and develop in the spiritual consciousness. This knowledge, this story is very instructive. The first step we must take is to understand that our senses and minds are imperfect and are always provoking me to accept something externally only. But if a person, through devotion, is searching for an enlightened vision and is searching for genuine teachers who are able to cultivate his vision spiritually. And what does it mean to spiritually see? Through the Upanishads, 6th mantra, it is described how this genuine spiritual master is showing how everything should be looked at. Anupashyati. This means to see with spiritual vision, following the directions of the genuine guru. And so the genuine guru teaches us how to see that everything is tied to the Lord. He is the source of everything. Therefore, not even a blade of grass shall move without the will of the Lord. Therefore, if some sort of situation is happening in our life, then behind it there is the will of God. Even if these situations are externally painful or unacceptable for us, then we must see the living entities who are in the field of our vision. We must see as parts and parcels of the Lord. And the third thing that's important is that we must strive for feeling the presence of the Lord in everything. In this mood, we must completely surrender to the Lord and feel how we could ideally feel this circumstance in order to satisfy and please our gurus and the Lord. And we must lean on the knowledge given by the guru. And as a result, such a person gains experience of this situation, which externally seems unpleasant. All of a sudden it shows itself that the will of God and the hand of God is behind everything. And so the devotee starts to feel that this is my lesson here. The Lord wants to give me this realization, having put me through this situation. For example, he wanted to teach me humility and patience or other qualities which help me along my path of development. And in this way, the devotee is liberated from the mood of unacceptance of things around me, because a good disciple is always a seeker and a student. And a good student always is looking for a guru, for somebody to give him that knowledge. And so the Lord directs the person to his guru, and this meeting occurs. And if a person wants to be fooled and he wants some sort of information that he is above others, he is better than others, become very great, and so with this desire he will meet a guru who is false, who will give him some sort of information, but this will be in the mode of ignorance, and the vision of that person will remain on that level. And the most incredible thing in this story is that Balabhadra Bhattacharya, who was the servant of Lord Chaitanya and knew that who he was, he also succumbed to this illusion, thinking maybe, in fact, there is Krishna there dancing on the waters of the Yamuna. And he asked Lord Chaitanya to go and see for himself. Why would Krishna come in the age of Kali? Foolish people are mistaken, are simply causing agitation and making a tumult. Here. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first statement, Krishna Kene Darshana Dibe Kali Kale. In other words, why would Krishna appear in age of Kali? Refers to the scriptures. According to scripture, Krishna appears in Dwapara Yuga, which was the previous Yuga, but he never appears as himself in Kali Yuga. Rather, he appears in Kali Yuga in a covered form, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 5th chapter, 32nd verse. Krishna Varnam, Tvishta Krishnam, Sangopagastram Parshadam. Krishna appears in the age of Kali in the garb of a devotee, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who always associates with his eternal soldiers, Sri Advaita Prabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Sri Vasa Prabhu, and Gadadhar Prabhu. And these are all members of the Panchatattva, the 5 manifestations of the truth. Although Balabhadra Bhattacharya was personally serving Lord Krishna in his role as a devotee, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he mistook Lord Krishna for an ordinary man and an ordinary man for Lord Krishna, because he did not follow the rules set down by Shastra and Guru. So this is another very important lesson from this story, is that a person who has come to the spiritual path and has not yet become firm and determined and stable in this position of a student, he will have temptations to accept illusion as truth and truth as illusion. Again, to come to this platform of sensual understanding. As long as a person has this inclination to be material or spiritual, it is called bhajana kriya, unstable service. Anistita means unstable. Sometimes the devotee is in spiritual consciousness, sometimes again he falls into material consciousness and becomes guided by the sensual perceptions. And it says here, it is very important to return themselves again and again and to interpret everything around us through the eyes of the scripture and the instructions given by the Guru. This is what will help the devotee to remain firm on his path to devotional service and spiritual path. But if a person refuses to look at everything in a sober way, in a spiritual way, and again falls into his sensual interpretations of the mind, then these illusionary world views will drag him back to interpret every event as something illusory. And this will lead to the devotee making mistakes and receive reactions and fall again into the path of karma, through which the person carries out actions and receives reactions. Of course, the devotee can come to his senses and return to his path. As the Guru said, that the Guru brings back the senses of the devotee. And the devotee can shake his head and think, oh, what on earth happened to me? Or perhaps a devotee can listen to the lecture of his Guru and become again awakened. So every day we must read the Holy Scriptures and to read the commentaries of the spiritual master, who is Srila Prabhupada, and to think deeply about these commentaries and to form a different view of our spiritual vision and to develop stably on our spiritual path. If we begin to do this formally and ritualistically out of a sense of duty, we read, but we do not let this knowledge into our heart and do not contemplate how do we apply this knowledge in our life practically. Why is this important for us? So this changes our view and our attitude to our life. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying to Balabhadra Bhattacharya, do not go insane, sit here today and tomorrow you can go and look at Krishna. Lord Chaitanya knew that soon this whole illusion will be dissipated, and so the next morning a few well-respected people came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and he asked, so you have seen Krishna? And these people said, during the night time the fisherman is lighting his lamp on the boat, and from far away on the shore the people are thinking that it is Krishna. They're taking the boat to be the snake and the light to be the jewels and the boatsman to be Krishna. But actually Krishna did return to Vrindavan, just like the fact that it is true that they saw Krishna. But however, they are looking for Krishna in the wrong place. It is similar to confusing a dried up tree with a live person. Commentary Prabhupada writes, the word stanu means a dry tree without leaves. From a distance, one may mistake such a tree for a person. This is called stanu purusha. Although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was living in Vrindavan, the inhabitants considered him an ordinary human being, and they mistook the fisherman to be Krishna. Every human being is prone to make such mistakes. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was mistaken for an ordinary sannyasi. The fisherman was mistaken for Krishna, and the torchlight was mistaken for bright jewels on Kali's hood. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, where have you seen Krishna directly? The people replied, you are a sannyasi and renunciate, therefore you are a moving Narayana. This is commented by Srila Prabhupada as, this is the viewpoint of Mayavadi philosophy. Mayavadi philosophy supports the impersonalist view that Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has no form. One can imagine impersonal Brahman in any form as Vishnu, Lord Shiva, Vivasvan, Ganesha or Devi Durga. And so there is this philosophy. This is also a concoction of the mind. The devotee, the people base this on some sort of scripture in which they are trying to explain that everyone is God and also I am God. Simply I just must remember this. And they take as manifestations of God as to be impersonal, and he takes simply different forms, temporary forms. And if these forms are destroyed, the living entity again becomes absorbed in God and become God again. Mayavadi philosophers hold that the real Narayana does not move. It is considered that sannyasi is on the highest level of realization of God. But Mayavadis consider such a person that has realized that he is God, then he must be God. In fact, this is the last snare of Maya, such philosophy, because this confusion, this illusion, which is that I am God, I am the center of this universe, this is the illusory trap. People should be becoming liberated from this illusion, but people concoct such philosophies that give firm foundation to this view. Thus, according to Mayavadi philosophy, whoever becomes a sannyasi declares himself Narayan. Mayavadi philosophy holds that real Narayan does not move because, being impersonal, he has no legs. Thus, according to Mayavadi philosophy, whoever becomes a sannyasi declares himself Narayan. Foolish people accept such ordinary human beings as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is called Vivarta Vada. In this regard, we will read a little further. Actually, an ordinary human being cannot become Narayan. As the chief Mayavadi sannyasi, Sri Shankaracharya says, Narayana Parovyaktat. Narayana is not a creation of this material world. Narayana is above the material creation. Due to their poor fount of knowledge, Mayavadi sannyasis think that Narayana, the absolute truth, takes birth as a human being, and that when he realizes this, he becomes Narayan again. So this is the core point of this illusion. And in the next verses is described. The people then said, "You have appeared in Vrindavan as an incarnation of Krishna. Just by seeing you, everyone is now liberated." Even though they spoke the truth, nevertheless they said this according to this false philosophy. They did not understand the genuine position of Krishna. Therefore they called sannyasi God. They saw in Lord Chaitanya a highly elevated sannyasi, but they put on him this Mayavadi philosophy and called him to be God. They did not understand the genuine nature of Lord Chaitanya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately exclaimed, "Vishnu, Vishnu, do not call me the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A jiva cannot become Krishna at any time. Do not even say such a thing." In the commentary, Srila Prabhupada says, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately stated that a living being, however exalted he may be, should never be compared to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's preachings protest the monistic philosophy of the Mayavada school. The central point of Krishna consciousness is that the jiva, the living entity, can never be accepted as Krishna or Vishnu. This viewpoint is elaborated in the next verse. And so the next verse. Sannyasi is a person who has renounced the world. Without a doubt, is a part of a whole, just like a shining molecule particle of sunshine is part and parcel of the sun itself. Krishna is like the sun, full of 6 opulences, but the living entity is only a fragment of the complete whole, and this is the correct viewpoint. A living entity is a tiny, tiny part, an insignificant part of the Supreme Being. The living entity has some qualities. It is also eternal. It is full of knowledge. It is inclined to realize knowledge, and it is blissful by nature. But because it is covered by material nature, these qualities reveal themselves very weakly. A person must awaken themselves again spiritually, and the eternal knowledge, bliss, and eternity is again revived, just like the Lord's qualities. But the living entity is very insignificant, whereas the eternal Lord is endless and all-expansive. A living entity and the absolute personality of Godhead are never to be considered equal, just as a fragmental spark can never be considered the original flame. Srila Prabhupada explains in the commentary, Mayavadi sannyasis consider themselves Brahman, and they superficially speak of themselves as Narayana. In other words, they think of themselves as this glowing light of Brahman, this spiritual light which comes from the effulgence of the Lord's form, and they call themselves Narayan, which is another name of the Lord. The monistic disciples of the Mayavada school, so these people who consider God impersonal, and the disciples of the school of Mayavada, known as Smarta Brahmanas, which are a sort of caste, traditional Brahmanas who have this philosophy in life. It is Brahmanas who are following family life, are generally household Brahmanas who accept the Mayavadi sannyasis as Narayana incarnate. So they bow down and think that this is an incarnation of the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately protested this unauthorized system, specifically mentioning that a sannyasi is nothing but a fragmental portion of the Lord. In other words, he is nothing more than an ordinary living being. He is never Narayan, just as a molecular portion of a sunshine is never the sun itself. The living entity is nothing but a fragmental part of the absolute truth. Therefore, at no stage of perfection can the living entity become the supreme personality of Godhead. This Mayavada viewpoint is always condemned by the Vaishnava school. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself protested this philosophy. When the Mayavadis accept sannyasa and consider themselves Narayan, they become so puffed up that they do not even enter the temple of Narayana to offer respects, for they falsely think themselves Narayana himself. Although Mayavadi sannyasis may offer respects to other sannyasis and address them as Narayan, they do not go to a Narayan temple and offer respects. These Mayavadi sannyasis are always condemned and are described as demons. This is a very interesting point here. So in our eyes, a demon is, he has horns, he looks very grotesque, very horrible person, but here, these sannyasis contaminated by the philosophy are considered demons, because the demons want to kill God, they want to make him impersonal and take all qualities away from him. So this is demoniac qualities, and one of the ways to kill God is to spread this false philosophy, which in fact kills this connection with the Lord in the hearts of other living entities. So it deprives the living entities with a genuine path in life, and this is what demons do. They try to disconnect other living entities from God and make the Lord impersonal and eventually kill him. This is demonic philosophy, and so in accordance with this, Srila Prabhupada makes this comment. The Vedas clearly state that living entities are subordinate parts and parcels of the Supreme, Eko Bahunam Yo Vidhati Kaman. The Supreme Being, Krishna, maintains all living entities. And so Lord Chaitanya continues in the next verse. He is quoting a verse from Vishnu Swami. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, is always full of transcendental bliss and is accompanied by the potencies known as Hladini and Samvit. The conditional The conditioned soul, however, is always covered by ignorance and embarrassed by the threefold miseries of life. Thus, he is a treasure house of all kinds of tribulations. In the next verse, Lord Chaitanya continues, a foolish person who says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the same as the living entity is an atheist, and he becomes subject to punishment by the Superintendent of Death, Yamaraj. And in the commentary, Srila Prabhupada states, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that the word Pashandi refers to one who considers the living entity under the control of the illusionary energy to be equal with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to all material qualities. Pashandi means an atheist. Another kind of Pashandi is one who does not believe in the spirit soul, the superior potency of the Lord, and therefore does not distinguish between spirit and matter. And so Srila Prabhupada gives two types of atheists. The first one being Mayavadi, in which we talked about, which makes the living entity equal to God, and the other ones saying that there is no God at all and the living entity comes from matter, do not believe in the spirit soul. While describing one of the offences against chanting the holy names, Jiva Goswami states in his Bhakti Sandarbha, worshippers of impersonalists like Dattatreya are also Pashandis, so those who bow down to such impersonalists, who create this philosophy and distribute it, and so these followers are also considered offenders. Concerning the offense of aham mamam buddhi or deyatam buddhi, considering the body to be the self, Jiva Goswami states, those who are overly absorbed in the conception of the body and the bodily necessities are also called Pashandis. So let's read the next verse. Those who put the demigods on the same level as the Lord should also be considered Pashandis. And here he states that it is not simply the people who are considered the same as the Lord. It is also those who consider the demigods and elevated living beings like Brahma and Shiva to be equal to Narayan is also an offender. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained the difference between an ordinary living being and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the people said, "No one considers you an ordinary human being. You are like Krishna in every respect, in both bodily features and characteristics. Your bodily features, we can see that you are none other than the son of Nanda Maharaj, although the golden luster of your body has covered your original complexion. Just like the aroma of deer musk cannot be concealed by wrapping it in a cloth, your characteristics as a Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be concealed by any means. Indeed, your characteristics are uncommon beyond the imagination of an ordinary living being. Simply by seeing you, the entire universe becomes mad with ecstatic love for Krishna. If they see you just once, even women, children, old men, meat-eaters, and members of the lowest caste immediately chant the holy name of Krishna, dance like madmen, and become spiritual masters capable of delivering the whole world. Apart from seeing you, whoever listens to your holy name is made mad with ecstatic love for Krishna and is able to deliver the three worlds. Simply by hearing your holy name, dog-eaters become holy saints. Your uncommon potencies cannot be described in words. Even a person born in a family of dog-eaters becomes immediately eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices, if he once utters the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or chants about him, hears about his pastimes, offers him obeisances, or even remembers him. A person who sees your face gains these benedictions. These glories of yours are only marginal. Originally, you are the son of Maharaj Nanda. And Srila Prabhupada states in his commentaries, the original characteristics of a substance are called Svarupa, and the subsequent corollaries are called Tadastha Lakshana, or marginal characteristics. The glories of the Lord's marginal characteristics prove him to be the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, the son of Maharaj Nanda. As soon as one understands this, one accepts Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then bestowed his causeless mercy upon all these people there, and everyone became ecstatic with love of Godhead. Finally, they all returned to their homes. Lord Chaitanya remained for some days at our Krura Tirtha. He delivered everyone there simply by distributing the holy name of Krishna and ecstatic love of the Lord. Here we will finish our reading. Today I will give some important conclusions from these readings. The first thing we spoke about was there are two ways of interpreting reality around us. The first one is relying upon the mind and the senses. So he sees some manifestations, and in the mind he makes a judgment, and this forms his worldview. I'm sure that many of us have this experience when this way we can accept a sinful person for a saint and a saint for a sinful person, and so in this way we can make mistakes in our relationships and then become incredibly burnt or cause offences in this way. So this is the illusory way of interpreting life and reality. In this way, obtaining a true understanding is impossible. A person is condemned to make mistakes because he has these four faults, which we were saying. The first one is senses are imperfect. The second one is prone to illusion. Third is to commit mistakes. And the fourth is tendency to cheat others. So these four hindrances of the soul, imperfections of the soul, is due to the fact that we rely upon the mind and the senses. It is said that a person like this is moved by pride, a sense of I am seeing everything correctly. As I see, it is so. This is the foolish interpretation by foolish people. When we read such interpretations, we consider them foolish, but it is important to see this in ourselves. This is deeply embedded in our hearts. This tendency to judge, to give a judgment upon others. And then there is a different way of looking at reality, which will lead us to the ultimate truth. In this way, we do not rely upon our own senses and minds. We rely fully upon the instructions of the spiritual master in the scriptures. And through the scriptures, we look upon everything. In this way, a person can understand everything correctly. The word of God in the temple, other people, he will not make them gods or consider them to be manifestations of matter, but see them as parts of and parcels of the Lord, and see in every event an event tied with the Lord's will. Every event is tied to the will of the Lord, connected to the Lord. Even the blade of grass will not move without the Lord's sanction. And when a person has this vision, he will become closer and closer to the Lord and develop his devotional service more and more. and develop in his love for God. And at some point we gain a qualification to see God face to face. And so at the end of this story, this is what happened with the residents of this village. They were able to see Lord Chaitanya with clear vision, and Lord Chaitanya gave them this mercy to have love of God. Similarly, just if a person follows this way and genuinely sees everything in the correct light, the Lord will bless such a living entity and allow them to awaken their consciousness, and he will gift them this love of God, which is initially there within the heart of every living entity. So when this tendency to see this illusionary life, then the person will become firm in his position, and the Lord will come towards him and he will answer him. And in this way the devotee develops his connection with the Lord, and eventually love of God will manifest. The heart is similar to a sleeping volcano. This love is there, but it cannot break through. But at some point, when a person, his consciousness is awakened, this consciousness, it explodes from within the heart, and the person becomes able to take upon this culture of love and live differently to how a simple living entity would live. So now, thank you very much for listening. We shall come to the questions if there are any. Thank you very, very much, Maharaj. There are many questions and wonderful feedback. Hare Krishna, could you please explain what is spiritual experience and spiritual taste? Thank you very much for such a question. Spiritual experience is a sort of realization within the heart when a person feels that what is happening with him is not just a given. The Lord is manifesting himself. What happens to the consciousness of such a person? It is like light has come to his consciousness. He remembers the directions and instructions of his spiritual master, and he thinks, oh, there it is, there is this realization, this is this experience which the spiritual teacher was talking about. It is very impossible to imagine such an occurrence. When this happens to a person, then they genuinely feel such an elevation, and they feel this connection with God is becoming stronger. And so this is the sign that a person has received a very important lesson which has brought him closer to the Lord, which has cut away some illusion within their heart, or a negative quality like pride or envy. Like in this situation, everything came to light, and they saw that this is the Lord himself, and they could feel incredibly tearful that the Lord is very merciful to them, and they have relived this experience. So this is experience of a student, of coming closer to God, and the person feels this, that he has become closer, and that some sort of negative tendencies have stepped away, and the godly qualities have increased. And so externally this is showing that a person is cleared from any hatred towards anybody. Usually a person, if he comes through a situation and hatred increases, then this is not a very good experience. This is an experience of pride, most likely. And so a spiritual experience is defined that inside they feel satisfaction. And if this is a material experience, they're feeling some sort of discontent and hatred. And if it is spiritual, then they are very happy, even if externally then it appears that this situation is not very good. Thank you. Next question. Could you please tell us how is a eternally conditioned soul awakened to become a spiritual soul, liberated soul? How do we awaken such a soul? We must show our example of being a good student. A person must be inspired to look at everything through the eyes of a disciple. As soon as a person comes to this consciousness of a student, then you can consider them liberated straight away, even though they may have attachments to some material things, but the position which they take is already spiritual. So it's only a matter of time before he's purified. And Srila Prabhupada gives this example that if a person's under the shower and he's dirty, you should not accuse a person that they are dirty. They will eventually become clean. It will take some days or some years for the devotee to become clean. And so Krishna says,
Apichet sudaracharo bhajantyamam ananyabhak satkur eva samantavyak samyak vaistohisah.
This is the 9th chapter, 30th verse, where it is said that even if a person is still committing bad actions, sudrachara, the worst action, if they are determined to continue elevating their consciousness and he's searching for God, he is looking for this enlightenment and this realization, he is going along the path of changing himself. He is already a saint, he is a sadhu, and very quickly he will become a pious, saintly person. Very quickly this person becomes pious. Therefore, to help a person to become a liberated soul, we must simply give him this taste for being a student and help them go through these stages. Thank you very much. Nadezhda is asking, how do we distinguish between spiritual realization to material and mental speculation, or can mental speculation go into spiritual realization? We are always relying upon the guidance of the scriptures of advanced and experienced devotees and the Guru's instructions. So if this experience is coming from their instructions to us, then this is a good experience. So if a devotee inside feels satisfaction and his relationship to others becomes more, not to say mode of goodness, more filled with acceptance and love, and the person is opening up. So this is the sign of correct progression. So this must always be founded upon the instructions of saintly people, the scriptures, and the Guru Sadhu Shastra. This is the path of our progression, what all genuine students are relying on. Thank you very much. Zinaida is asking, please explain, how do we correctly understand that Lord Chaitanya, in a very young age, left his mother and wife and went to the preach? Usually this would be considered irresponsible towards the women who are dependent on him. Please explain. In Caitanya-Caritamrta it is explained, and in Caitanya-Bhagavatamrta it is explained especially, that yes, externally Lord Chaitanya did this because in his mission of this incarnation is to liberate all conditioned souls. So in this family life, he was not able to do this because all these sannyasis and mayavadis and grihastas and even his students, they were insulting Lord Chaitanya without understanding his internal moods. They were not able to accept him genuinely. But having become a sannyasi, everyone was obliged to respect him. And so this gave Lord Chaitanya a chance to teach teach them. And so until they were enlightened with the correct understanding, Lord Chaitanya was not able to give them mercy. So if they were in an offensive mood towards him, he was not able to give them mercy. So at the same time, he explained to his mother that we are eternally connected. I was always in the past incarnating with you as my mother, and in the future this will be. And also, I will manifest myself as the holy name, and you will be the incarnation of the tongue upon which the holy name is born. So you will give birth to me again and again, and I will appear as the deity of Lord Chaitanya, which will be my incarnation, and you will be the material out of which this deity is made. And I will manifest myself within this deity. So you and me are never separate. I will always be with you. And I take full responsibility for you. This is how Lord Chaitanya stated. And in fact, he was always very caring for his mother. Every day he would come to her house. He would take the food she offered, and literally the plates became empty. She offered this food and Lord Chaitanya would eat. So every day he took prasad of his mother. Lord Chaitanya never rejected his mother, and he never rejects his devotees, but for the good of all living entities. Lord Chaitanya took this form of a sannyasi in order to save everyone, to complete his mission. It was a step of taking greater responsibility than simply staying in a family, which would be a form of egotism. And he would have, for the sake of his close relationships, he would have neglected his wider family. It would have been egotistic from his point of view. Because he is in charge of all the living entities, it is the family of the Lord. Everyone is in illusion and they must be saved. And so the Lord shows his mercy by going towards his greater family as if going away from his mother, but actually internally he's always connected to her. And even after taking sannyas, he met her when he came to Shantipur, and the mother got the opportunity to see him. And he gave her Mahaprasad, and there was always this connection. And a mother sometimes must come to this point, and the sons and daughters must be allowed to go into the world to fulfill their mission. The mother cannot hold on to her sons and daughters always. It would be egotistic. For example, if they took sannyas, the loving relationship increases even more, because the son is grateful for the mother's blessings, and the mother feels that the son is gaining success in his life. Therefore, she is joyful. She will not be joyful if he is simply sitting at home like a fool and his mission is incomplete. What sort of life is this? And therefore, any mother has to renounce, to give her children into the world and to bless them at this time. Of course, this is a separation for the mother, but if she does this, then this relationship with the children will remain, even though at a distance in the heart, and the mother will be happy and she would have fulfilled the aim of her life. Thank you. We have a few minutes just for the last question. Could you please tell us how to stop desiring new material things? We must simply engage our senses and engage ourselves in the service of the Lord. We must engage with this process, and everything which we do, and any desires which are not sinful. For example, if you have a desire to act because we are active beings. Perhaps we have a desire to act as a manager or whatever your nature is. This desire to act, we must engage it in the service of Krishna, or repeat the holy name, receive spiritual knowledge in association with devotees, and slowly your worldview will change and your motivation will change. And at some point you will feel that you're going to work not simply because you want to work, but because you want to serve Krishna, because it is your way of serving the Lord. And this will begin to fill your heart with happiness and bliss of this relationship with the Lord. So we must not renounce our desire to desires. It is a process of changing our desires. This is the answer. Thank you. Thank you very, very much for this very engaging class of Bhagavatam you have given to us. We would like to remind our spectators that at 12 o'clock we have got a session, and in half an hour Valmiki Prabhu will be reading Caitanya-Caritamrta. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a very good day. Maharaj, thank you. I wish everyone great success in your spiritual path, and to find the platform of a student in this life. You can overcome any difficulties and reach all spiritual success. The Lord himself will lead you. But if you have an egotistic position, then it will be what will happen with every person. So I wish you success. Hare Krishna.